this conversation is typically one I don't care for too much, but a lot of boxing fans really hold this dear to their heart. The pound for pound list. We see debates here, we see arguments here, we see people get into fights over who's on the pound for pound list, We see friendships end over these kind of arguments. I don't want to lose any of you guys as friends. Listen, I'm gonna give you my pound for pound list. It's very debatable. I'm always willing to hear what you guys think. Obviously, there's gonna be some people that are happy with my choices, some people that are gonna hate my choices. People are gonna call me a hater for not putting their guy at the top, or for not putting their guy on my top 5. There's always something. Listen, you can make some of the people happy some of the time. You can never make all the people happy all the time. That's what I've learned in my 41 years on this planet. Having said that, here is my pound for pound list so far as we enter 2022. My number 1 guy on the pound for pound list is Terrence Crawford, a multiple weight world champion. He's a guy who can fight out of both stances, a very cerebral fighter, very intelligent fighter, relies on timing, picking his shots, really hard to pick a mistake in his style. You see so much versatility in this guy, and he fights out of both stances very, very well, out of both stances, no less. He can go to the body. He's got stoppages to the body. He's got stoppages to the head. He's got 1-punch stoppages to the body. He's got 1-punch stoppages to the head. And he's got incredible boxing skills that just will dazzle you out of both stances. I don't even know what he's better at. I know he prefers to fight out of the southpaw stance, but I think if Terrence Crawford was just in the right-handed position, I still think maybe he wouldn't be number 1 pound for pound, but I think if just a right-handed version of Terrence Crawford would probably still be in the top 10 pound for pound list, But the fact that he's just as good out of both stances and remains undefeated and continues to fight top opposition, especially with his recent win over Shawn Porter, I thought that was very, very impressive, because I think Porter is a guy who specializes not just in being a top fighter, but also in making you look bad, especially when you have that pretty style. Trust me, I would know. I like to be a slick boxer, take my time, and Porter just ruins that for you, absolutely ruins that, and mauls you all over the place, and really takes away your comfort zone in a vicious way. He's got that mean streak in there. So I was really wondering if Crawford, having never seen a guy like this, or he had seen Jeff Horn, but I was wondering if Porter, with his amateur pedigree and really having been a world-class amateur as well, had something extra to bring to the table besides that physicality. Don't get me wrong, I picked Crawford to win the fight based on the fact that of the way he looked against Jeff Horn. I thought that was really the fight to compare that matchup. If you were going to go into that matchup and you were going to think, who is Crawford fought that you could at least give a comparison to Porter, I would have said it was Jeff Horn. Was a physically mauling guy, and probably was even physically bigger than Shawn Porter. So I did pick Crawford to win the fight, but I was curious to see if he'd be troubled, if he'd look bad. And for all intents and purposes, listen, it was a great performance by Terrence Crawford, and I thought it was a very respectable performance by Shawn Porter. But for me, he cements himself as the number 1 guy on the pound for pound list with a terrific win over Shawn Porter, a guy who, you were starting to question to see, I knew some guys that were saying, oh, maybe Porter is the guy that beats Crawford. He's always been competitive against all these guys, and he's the ex-world champion. Who knows, In the end, Crawford passed the fight. I wouldn't say with flying colors. There were some moments where he was a little bit uncomfortable, but hey, man, this is world-class boxing. You're not going to breeze through everybody. But nonetheless, he got a stoppage over Shawn Porter. He became the first guy to stop Shawn Porter. He did it in style, and he's the number 1 pound for pound fighter on the planet, in my opinion. My number 2 fighter on the planet in boxing for going into 2022, Canelo Alvarez, Saul Canelo Alvarez. He's the guy who continues to raise his level of opposition, continues to beat top guys, and continues to look for all the top guys. There is a point where everybody, when we start to talk about these pound for pound guys with these top guys, we start to nitpick them a little bit, because, maybe we want to have another guy at the top of the pound for pound list and not that particular guy, or maybe we don't want to rank somebody so high on the pound for pound list, so we start to say, oh, well, he's avoiding certain guys, or he's not fighting top guys. I think the point has come when you look at Canelo Alvarez, and you can't really say that anymore. He's continuing to look for top opposition. He's fighting top opposition. In 2021, he beat Billy Joe Saunders, and then he beat Caleb Plant. So actually at the beginning of the year, he even beat Avni Yildirim. You would say, okay, maybe he's not on the level of those guys. But nonetheless, he fought 3 times in this year, right? He fought 3 times. Yeah, it was 3 times, and looked great in all 3 fights. He did what he did with Yildirim. Listen, You don't rate Lil Drum? You don't rate Lil Drum that much? Okay, fine. Canelo treated him as such. Got rid of him right away. You know, Billy Joe Saunders, let's face it. Billy Joe had looked really good in a lot of fights. You know, I personally loved the fact that Billy Joe had gone into Montreal, gone on against a popular puncher and went in front of a rough crowd and had ice in his veins. And handled David Lemieux easily in Montreal. I looked at that performance and I said, okay, Lemieux's not on the level of Canelo Alvarez, but when you fight a Canelo Alvarez, the crowd is so vociferous and loud, and it can play on your emotions. This guy's got ice in his veins. This guy's got ice in his veins, and the crowd is not going to affect him in the Canelo Alvarez fight. And if the crowd's not affecting him in the Canelo Alvarez fight, I mean, he's going to be pretty slick. It's going to be quite a fight. To be honest, Canelo never looked like he was going to lose that fight. Yes, Billy Joe had a couple of good moments, but I never felt like Billy Joe was threatening Canelo's ability to win that fight. Going into the fight, I thought he might, but as I was watching the fight, I said, wow, this is getting pretty comfortable for Canelo. Obviously, again, it's a world-class fight. It's not a complete breeze, but it was pretty comfortable. I found Billy Joe having a lot of trouble getting into the proper distance. Even when he was landing punches, he was landing them at the tail end of the shots where there wasn't as much mustard on them anyway. And in the end, he was throwing them probably from a little bit too far out, and that was why. And ultimately, Canelo made him pay for that. Billy Joe came up short on the left hand, and Canelo kind of slipped and countered it with a big uppercut and shattered the orbit bone of Billy Joe Saunders, and that was all she wrote. Comment on whatever you want to say about Billy Joe quitting in that fight for the broken orbit bone. Trust me, guys, that is not an easy fight, not easy injury to fight with. I fought with that injury. I reserve all criticism for anybody who can't fight with that injury. I take it away. You know, I did fight with that injury when I was 25 years old against Miguel Cotto, but trust me, it's not an injury that I necessarily could have fought with each and every time. I mean, if this has happened constantly, I wouldn't have been able to go 12 rounds every time. So, you know, I don't necessarily criticize the guy who couldn't continue in a fight when he had his orbit bone broken. But a terrific win for Canelo Alvarez nonetheless. Caleb Plant came next. Caleb Plant had been a slick fighter, undefeated like Billy Joe Saunders, and he'd been a guy who, you know, had been class inside the ring. You know, in his performances, Jose Uzcategui was a rugged, big puncher. He won the title against him. This was for all the marbles at 168 pounds, the unified, undisputed 168-pound title. And I thought Caleb fought smart, a cerebral fight, a very capable fight. But as I watched that fight, I remember thinking, he's playing, you know, he's playing that chess match here in the fight, but he's got to get a little bit meaner. Sometimes you've got to take that chance and get a little bit meaner and get the respect of your opponent. Even me, that I wasn't such a big puncher, there were moments when I was playing chess when I would start to put a little bit more mustard behind my shots just to let my opponent know, like, yo, you know, you can't we're not just going to play touch and go here in this fight, because if you're playing touch and go in this fight, eventually there comes a point where a world-class fighter just doesn't respect you anymore, and it becomes harder and harder to win the fight. I thought Caleb fought smart, but sometimes he also fought too safe. And maybe that's smart. And maybe that's smart in terms of, you know, avoiding a big injury or whatnot. But at the end of the day, with all the marbles on the line, I would have liked to see Caleb take a little bit more chances. Nonetheless, he didn't. He kept trying to play that little touch and go game, you know, where he, at close range, you know, catching, shooting, you know, but he never really turned it. You never looked at any combination Caleb threw and say, wow, you know, he really turned some mustard into that shot, into that combination. He let Canelo know, like, yo, you know, don't come out of pocket too much. It never happened, and eventually what happened is Canelo did come out of pocket. He started getting a little bit more aggressive. He started having a little bit less and less respect for Caleb as he was coming to him and taking the fight to him. And eventually, you know, it was only a matter of time before the big shots finally started landing, and he got his man out of there. Canelo Alvarez, the #2 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. I'm curious to see how things shape up in 2022 because he's fighting Jermall Charlo, a guy that I have said could beat him. So I'm ready to eat crow if Canelo Alvarez proves me wrong and beats Jermall Charlo this year. It looks like the fight's about to get signed and made. I can't wait for this fight. And you also, as I said at the top of this discussion about Canelo Alvarez, you can no longer criticize Canelo about, oh, he's close to the pound for pound list, so maybe he is at the top of the pound for pound list on some lists, and you can no longer say, oh, well, he's not fighting certain guys. I think he's fighting them all. Listen, I wanted to see the Jermall Charlo fight more than I wanted to see the Makubu fight or wherever the cruiserweight champion was. At light heavyweight, the guys are dangerous, but it's out of Canelo's weight class. Listen, I'm not going to criticize Canelo for not fighting a light heavyweight. I think it's just going up too much. Once a guy goes to that weight class, especially fighting the killers that are light heavyweight, if Canelo loses, I wouldn't even be able to criticize him because it's just the weight class is too big, and they're really all strong champions right now, you know. So I think the Charlo fight is a great fight. I love the Charlo fight. I love the clash of styles. I think Charlo has something for Canelo, and you know what? I've been picking Charlo to win the fight. I can't go against that. But nonetheless, man, I can't wait for the fight. I can't wait for the fight. And if Canelo is able to beat Charlo, who knows? You know, we'll see how the fight shapes up. But maybe in the method he beats him. We'll see in the method that he wins, the way the fight shapes up. Maybe Canelo overtakes Crawford at the top of the pound for pound list. At least on my list. Possibly. Let's see how it shapes up in 2022. My number 3 fighter on the pound for pound list is Oleksandr Usyk, the former undisputed cruiserweight world champion. Now has almost all of the belts in the heavyweight division, bar the WBC title that Tyson Fury has. So, interestingly enough, you know, you would hope that there's a possible unification at some point in 2022 where Usyk gets a chance to win the undisputed heavyweight title. It would be an incredible achievement because I think Fury right now is probably too big for Usyk, but nonetheless, once he's got all 3 of the 4 belts, you know, and of course, you know, we can't overlook the rematch he has with AJ. I want to see if the adjustments can be made by AJ. That's something I'm curious about. But right now, we're talking about Usyk as champion and Usyk as a 2-weight world champion and has unified many titles. At cruiserweight, he unified all of them. At heavyweight, he took a bunch of unified titles from Anthony Joshua, and so going into the rematch with AJ, it's going to take a lot of adjustments from AJ. I picked AJ going into the first fight. I thought he was going to be too big and too strong. And I thought, personally, after a good start, Usyk was going to eventually fade out and be made to fade out by a bigger, stronger Anthony Joshua. It wasn't the case. Who knows? You know, I'm curious to see if AJ can make those adjustments in the rematch. But right now, based on what I saw in the first fight, it's going to take a mega adjustment on the part of Anthony Joshua to beat the Oleksandr Usyk that I saw in their first fight. And if that's the case, you know, we'll go by the fact that, say Usyk wins the fight. Are we going to get a heavyweight unification with Fury? Interesting. We'll find out. We can't overlook Dillian White, who has never fought for a world title. And deservedly, it looks like he's going to get his shot at Tyson Fury. You know, the picks in those fights right now, just off the top of your head, right? If you really think about it, you know, anything happens. That's why they fight the fights in the ring. But you think about Fury and Usyk coming out on top of those in that fight, and Usyk has a chance, will then get a chance to unify the heavyweight division like he unified the cruiserweight division. I don't know that there's ever been a fighter that has been the undisputed world champion at 2 weight classes in the multiple belt era. Obviously, at one time there was 1 belt per weight class, so if you won a world title in 2 weight classes, technically you were undisputed in those weight classes. But in the multiple belt era, in the unification era, I don't think it's ever happened because there's so much that gets in the way of unifying world titles in 2 weight classes. So if Usyk could really pull that off, I mean, I think he's got a chance to at least go for it. We'll see if he can pull it off. It's another issue nonetheless. But he's undefeated, had a magnificent amateur career, and now is having himself a stellar professional boxing career. He's my number 3 guy on the pound for pound list. We'll see how he looks against Anthony Joshua. I'm looking forward to that rematch. NAOYA INOUE is my number 4 fighter on the pound for pound list. This guy is a boxing firestorm. I mean, this guy is a time bomb in the ring. He is a devastating knockout puncher. He can fight. He's got some good speed, good accuracy. Had one of the best fights you'll ever watch. His fight with Nonito Donaire a couple of years ago. Nonito Donaire, who actually in his older age has now won another world title, and is looking for a rematch with NAOYA INOUE. I mean, I watched that fight thinking and loving Donaire, who had been an amazing fighter at bantamweight and had been an amazing fighter in his whole career at all the weights, but at bantamweight he had been especially devastating. But as he was getting a little bit older, I thought INOUE would probably end up stopping him in his older age. Instead, they went at it for 12 rounds. He gave INOUE the toughest fight of INOUE's career. INOUE, a guy who had just been knocking everybody out. And it's one of the best fights you'll ever watch. Anybody who hasn't watched that fight yet, go watch NAOYA INOUE against Nonito Donaire from, I think it was 2019 or 18 now. I can't remember exactly, but what a fight. What a fight, and we might get that rematch this year because Donaire has gone on and knocking out Northern Nobali, won the WBC, I think it was bantamweight title. Yeah, I think it was the bantamweight title. So they might end up clashing once again. INOUE is my number 4 fighter on the pound for pound list. Devastating puncher, one of the most exciting fighters in the sport, and like I said before, skills, fast hands, accurate, knows how to put it together, 1-punch devastating power. I don't think you'll find a bantamweight right now on the planet that can beat this guy, you know, and we'll see how many weight classes he can go up, because really he's already gone up a few weight classes already, you know, and for a small guy to go up that many weight classes to keep that kind of power, it gets a little bit more difficult. But right now, anytime you get a chance to watch INOUE, I think he can't miss TV. Some guys are really skilled on the pound for pound list, but they're not as explosive as this guy. This guy is the kind of guy who you don't have to explain it even to a casual. You just put a casual in front of the TV, you let them watch NAOYA INOUE, and the fight speaks for itself. Sometimes you got some really skilled fighters on the pound for pound list, and you think to yourself, okay, if I got my casual friend who's going to watch the fight, I've got to explain some of the tactics that they're going to be seeing and help them understand better. With INOUE, you got tactics, but this guy's looking to take you out every single shot he throws, and he's got such accuracy and such speed that most fights that he's in, they end in those kind of knockouts. So everybody can understand that. And not everybody can understand the cerebral part of boxing, but everybody understands knockouts when they see one. And NAOYA INOUE understands knockouts. He gets knockouts, and he's my number 4 fighter on the pound for pound list. My number 5 fighter on the pound for pound list is Josh Taylor. Now, I'd love to say Errol Spence, but he's not been busy lately. In the meantime, so he's gonna slightly edge out Errol Spence here. In the meantime, Josh Taylor has been busy. He's unified the 140-pound championship, and I thought he did it in style with a terrific win over Jose Ramirez, who himself was not only a terrific fighter, but a fighter who I thought might be able to beat Josh Taylor. You know, I really couldn't pick a winner in that fight as they were going into it. They both come in with some really good wins on their ledger, and they were really coming in with a lot of excitement going into that fight. You know, the only shame about that fight was that it didn't get the crossover coverage that I felt it deserved. So both guys are terrific fighters. Shame on the UK for not getting the UK TV for Josh Taylor. I mean, the guy's from Scotland. He's in a unification fight for the undisputed 140-pound title, and from what I was told, there was no UK TV. That was disgraceful, especially for a region of the world that to me has the best boxing fans in the world. I mean, they couldn't get their stuff together and get it on a network. A guy of that level, a UK fighter of that level. Personally, to me, Taylor is already the best Scottish fighter that's ever laced on a pair of boxing gloves. Right now, even if he was to retire right now, I don't think there's a better Scottish fighter, a better fighter from Scotland that has come out, a better fighter that has come out of Scotland than Josh Taylor. Yeah, you respect the Ken Buchanan. Even Ricky Burns won multiple titles in multiple weight classes. Solid, good championship level fighter, but I'm sure there's others, but Josh Taylor to me is a phenom of another level. The Jose Ramirez fight was another impressive win. He's got wins over Ivan Baranchyk when Baranchyk was still, you know, not the Baranchyk now who's starting to lose luster. It was a Baranchyk who was had a real mean streak and looked like a real devastating fighter. He beat him then. He beat Regis Prograis as well. He's got some very good wins on his resume, and I think he's continuing to get better and better. I can't wait to see him make his defense against Jack Catterall and continue to watch him rise after that as well, with respect to Catterall, of course, but nonetheless, he's my number 5 fighter on the pound for pound list. Errol Spence is right there. He just hasn't been busy. I look forward to seeing him return from the eye injury after that car accident. Thankfully, he's okay. And you know, from what I hear, he's back in the gym training and, you know, looking okay, you know. So we hope that Errol Spence can come back in and try to cement his place back on that top 5 pound for pound list, at least on my list, you know. I'd love to be able to see Spence and Crawford someday soon, not just someday soon. But I don't think I'd want to see it in Spence's first fight back after that accident. I'd love to see Spence first, see how he looks, make sure everything's going well, and then I'd love to see that fight. So hopefully that fight can happen. You know, honorable mention for the top 5 guys that didn't make it for my top 5. Obviously, we mentioned Spence, Tyson Fury could be another one. Vasyl Lomachenko, you know, he's probably on a lot of people's top 10 pound for pound. You know, I'm not giving you a top 10 because I didn't even feel like giving you a top 5, guys, to be honest with you. You know, like I don't like these lists, but I did it for you guys because I know they're great debate subjects and they're great conversation. And so why don't you guys, you know, comment. Check out in the comment sections. Check into the comment section and give me your top 5 pound for pounder. Tell me what you disagree with. This is a subject matter, honestly, that everybody disagrees on at some point, some point in time. You guys, there's gonna be some of you guys that are gonna hate me for this list. There's gonna be some of you guys that are gonna like me for this list. I welcome your lists as well, and why you believe some guys deserve to be on certain places on the list. And like, comment, subscribe, and you know, we can talk about it.